This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. So today, as this episode is released, it's the 15th of December, only a few more days and then we'll be winding down for the festive break. Now, as far as today goes though, today's guest is a very special guest. In hindsight, it's a bit crazy that we're now at episode 210 and I haven't invited her onto the show before. Her name is Anna Parker-Naples, and Anna has been an instrumental part in this podcast. If it wasn't for her, I'm not sure if the podcast would have actually launched and got off the ground. Because going back to December 2019, for a good 6 months I was heavily involved in a Facebook group and a membership group of Anna's, which guided me through the whole process to get the podcast actually launched, which incidentally is the most difficult part. Now fast forward 4 years on, the podcast is thriving and I'm so grateful for Anna's support during that time. And if you're a person who is thinking about launching a podcast, you'd like to get a podcast off the ground, what I would do is I would check out Anna's book. She has a book called Podcasting with Impact, which highlights a step-by-step process to get a podcast off the ground, as well as a whole host of other bits of advice when it comes down to the podcasting space. Anyway, as I say, I'm very grateful to Anna. I'm also grateful to you, the listener. We've nearly touched 100,000 people now when we look at the figures from Apple across a range of countries. So we've had a significant impact on people's lives, which is what this show is all about. Now, as far as today goes, Anna's interests have broadened. She's now an influential breathwork coach. So we're going to have a good conversation where we talk about the breath, how it impacts on our mind, how it impacts on our body. We'll talk about the health benefits of using the breath, the performance benefits of using the breath, how the breath can help us deal with pressure, which is essentially what mental toughness is all about. And then we're going to touch on cold water. You'll know about my obsession with cold water if you've listened to previous episodes. Anna is currently going through training to gain qualifications when it comes down to the use of deliberate cold immersion. And she's looking to expand her business down that route too. So we do go and touch on cold water therapy. I hope you go on to enjoy the episode. Hi Anna, it's lovely to catch up again. Would you be able to share with the listeners a little bit about your background and your interest in breathwork?
So I am an entrepreneur and a coach, and the last, I would say 7 years, I've gone pretty hardcore at building a personal brand, particularly around helping business owners to get visible and to have their own podcasts. And I knew when I really specialized in podcasting that I was leaving. It meant that as I grew that business, which still exists, that I was almost putting down for a while my own interests of really sharing the personal development side of things and helping people to think and feel better and differently. And the last couple of years have been really hard for us as a family, lots of mental health challenges. And I actually had a massive panic attack that presented like a heart attack about 18 months ago. And it was at that point I knew I had to do something to look after myself. I couldn't stay in the stress levels that I was in. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of it was work. Some of it was, pressures at home. But also I wasn't looking after myself, because often when there's things going on in the family, you forget as parents, put yourself first. And I literally felt that I had to learn to put my own oxygen mask on first. And suddenly breath work was being mentioned everywhere. And I decided on a bit of a whim, I'm going to train in this. If something's appealing to me, that tends to be my habit, I will go full on. And without knowing it, I signed up for a 400-hour course, one of the longest in the world, most in-depth in the world. And it rescued me. Not only did I find it fascinating from the breathwork side, I guess I went into it curious about breathwork as in the type that you might see where people are in a sweaty tent in Bali and they are, really having these deep transformative moments. That really interested me. That drew me in. I felt like I needed to regain my sense of self-trust. However, once I started the training, all the research I was doing, I was just blown away time and time again by the fact that really simple changes to how we breathe could fundamentally change our world, could change our health. And I wouldn't have got in the situation I got myself into, having such a strong panic attack and the amount of adrenaline and cortisol in my body, had I known these simple things. So now I am multi-qualified in different breathwork schools, many different breathing schools, and also as a cold water instructor as well, which I'm sure we will discuss a little bit later on, David. And now what I do is I've created a company called Influential Breathwork, which helps to certify other people to be a multidisciplined breathing coach / breathwork expert. And it feels like I'm creating something. I feel like I'm creating an army of people who are going to go out and genuinely make very quick changes to people's lives, which feels really meaningful.
Firstly, I'm sorry to hear, obviously, about the health challenges 18 months or so ago, and hats off to you for making these changes. I'm intrigued. You mentioned about simple changes to your breathing.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
So, in terms of functional breathing, right, I think we would all get the concept quite easily that if we're breathing properly, the rest of our body's going to work. Approximately 80%, I can't remember the exact, but let's just say 80%-ish, 80% of us are breathing dysfunctionally. And that might mean that we are mostly breathing from our upper chest rather than from our diaphragm and our belly. It might mean that our posture is collapsing our lungs, so the bottom half of our lungs can't be accessed, and actually there's a lot of blood in the bottom part of our lungs, and so they're not getting the oxygen to that area of the lungs. Posture can really affect our breathing, and also a lot of people, without realizing it, because of our modern culture, are breathing in a way that creates stress. Their breathing itself is creating a stress response. Now, what I mean by that is, if you think about the massive changes in our lifestyle from just before the Industrial Revolution to now, we're talking 250 years, but our bodies had been living in a particular way for millennia. And so what effectively has happened in our society is we've changed our way of living fundamentally, but what we haven't changed, our bodies haven't evolved to catch up yet. And take, for example, the fact that these days pretty much everybody has a phone. We get emails, we get pings, we get notifications. I get BBC News flashing up that the news is in. And every single time you get that, you get a little notification, you're getting a shot of adrenaline, right? Which is your fight or flight response being activated, your sympathetic nervous system. And it's great. We need stress. We absolutely need stress. But what's happened to our bodies is that we've got too much of it to be able to cope, right? And what happens is we aren't actually aware really of how to engage the other part of the central nervous system, the parasympathetic, which allows us to rest and digest. And as a result of that, we are often, in an attempt to calm ourselves down, often what we're doing is breathing in a way that sends a signal to our brain that we are stressed and we need to keep doing whatever it means to be stressed. And, you can hear just from a little bit of what I've shared of why this has really made me curious. When I started having massive panic attacks out of nowhere, I wouldn't have associated myself with mental health, wouldn't have associated myself with panic attacks or anxiety or depression. They weren't words that I would see other people experiencing those things, but not me. So the more we can learn from a functional perspective how to breathe, that our body works optimally. So we have this balance between stress and relaxation. the better everything is. The more we sleep, the more we are able to have great cognitive function. We can think, we can make better decisions. Our mental health improves, our cardiovascular system improves, our respiratory improves. I mean, literally everything. And it blows me away that we don't know this stuff.
Yeah, as you say, the benefits are crazy physically and mentally. Yeah. In terms of, I think what I'm interested in here is your daily habits now. So how have they actually changed on a personal level in terms of your focus on your breath?
So at the moment, my husband and I are getting up and doing a cold water ice bath in the morning. So we are actually doing quite activating breaths, and a specific. Each cold water method has its own, depending who you train with, have their own, but I do a particular protocol that is not dangerous. Some of them are. So my morning always starts with an activating breath called a superventilation. Then I have a particular hold after an exhale. And then I go into a much deeper, slow belly breath. And I repeat it several times. So I would spend at least 10 to 12 minutes doing this before I'd get in the water. And what this is doing is putting my body under deliberate stress. That's what the superventilation is. It's like hardcore hyperventilation through an open mouth. So through the open mouth breathing tends to be a chest breathe because we're doing it really fast and we can't do a fast breath into our belly. So it's showing your body that it can get stressed. The hold after the exhale as well is showing your body, again, another type of stress through breath, because breathing, holding your breath after an exhale is really different. It does a very different thing to your body than when you hold after an inhale. It's showing your body that you can get to the edges of discomfort, and then you have the ability to calm your system down, calm your nervous system down by doing these really slow, deep breaths through your nose into your belly. And the whole point of that is that you're training your body to have stress and release it in the same way, like you would know, David, that we exercise, we put our muscle under stress so that it can rest and repair and have this balance in it. And that's effectively what we're doing with breath. So that's my morning starts with that, and then a nice little dip. Mm-hmm. And then I tend now to do usually 2 or 3 times a week, a 30-minute breathwork journey. So on my own, with audios I've created, I have a whole hub of them that I've done over the years, or ones that my mentors or other breathwork coaches have created. And that will be for a specific release. Okay. So what I mean by that is that the breath would be really an activating breath for 30 minutes, doing the same kind of deep breathe. And there's usually music. There's often subconscious programming things that are going in as well, because you get through that particular type of breath work, conscious connected breath, you get into a really deep theta state, really deep brainwave state. It's deeper than like hypnosis or something like that. And so your subconscious mind is really open to suggestion. In a good way. You can't put anything bad in there. It's all good stuff. But what that kind of breath does is release any build up of stress in my body, like properly comes out. And also it's been shown as a somatic exercise to help you release stuck trauma within your energy, within your body, but also within your energy system. So a lot of trauma research that's been done has just shown that, you know, we can do all these subconscious reprogrammings, which are incredibly powerful, and I fully believe in them. But our body will often hold the score. Our body holds the memory, our cells, our fascia, our tissues, our muscles. And what we can do through a deep breath work is release and reset and let go of some of the stuff we've held on to. And then in the evenings, or when I feel stressed, like when I'm much, much better at noticing like what's going on for me, I will then intentionally do a short exercise to regain my equilibrium. And then I also do some breathing protocols that are about developing functional breathing. I'm a long way off being a functional breather. It's going to be a while, but there are simple things you can do that improve the breath within a few weeks. And I would say I'm probably halfway through that journey at the moment.
That sounds exciting and fascinating. Some of the things you've mentioned there. I know off air beforehand, you mentioned that you're not a person to delve into one particular technique as such. Initially, you like to research and look at different bodies of evidence there. I'm curious. Obviously, Wim Hof's work. You've done some training there, and you're currently going through the training. Is the breathing that you explained there, is that very different to Wim Hof's approach?
So the breathing that I explained right at the beginning, before I get into the pool, is that's actually it's from a company called Apnea Survival, and that's their cold water protocol. Wim Hof is incredible for what he does, but he's also quite controversial because some of his breath works are too activating immediately before you get into the water, according to many other breathwork experts. It's not necessarily my knowledge. It's not necessarily me saying that. But I'm curious. I'm curious about what are the different schools doing and why. I like to understand and then come to a decision for myself as to what this is. And I feel a strong responsibility. If I'm going to help lead the way with teaching more people about the breath, I want to feel like I know the argument, even if I don't know the full answer. Wim Hof, I think, has done an incredible amount for awareness of taking control of your own body through the breath and through getting in cold water and inflammation and all of those things. But as I said, there's lots of other scientists and breath workers who are cautious of his work, I would say.
Yeah. I know I did twice now. I've done workshops where I've had a full day with a Wim Hof instructor, and the breathing, it blew me away. In all honesty, it was. I think we must have spent about an hour where we were doing the different exercises that he mentions, and it took me off to places I didn't know existed. Well, it was really strange.
This is the thing. So I guess I came into breathwork. I'd had this, obviously, I'd reached crisis point with my body because of stress. And I felt that not only did I want to trust myself a bit more, but that I was curious about all sorts of potentially spiritual connection. I don't ever know that those words sit with me, but connection to something more than myself, let's put it that way, or self-trust or inner knowledge. And what's incredible about some of the longer breathwork protocols is that they can take you into completely altered states of consciousness, without a doubt. And in fact, back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the breathwork movements there, particularly something called holotropic breath, came about because the research into LSD was cancelled, automatically, almost overnight. The US government just put a complete ban on anyone doing any scientific research. But they'd be finding that LSD had been helping people have essentially spiritual awakenings or changes in their consciousness. And what they decided, okay, so we can't do that now with LSD, but what if we look at the behaviors that happened immediately after they'd taken it? And one of the behaviors that happened was this rapid breathing, often through the mouth. It would be stimulating that to happen. So what they decided to do was do that research into what happens to the brain and the body biochemically, and from a brainwave experience, what happens if, instead of taking the LSD, we just get them to do these breathing protocols. And that's really where the initial breath work, in terms of a transformative modality and a release modality, a trauma release modality, came from. Now, the interesting thing about that is that a lot of this research was being done quite near to Silicon Valley. And we know that many of those huge influencers and the amount of technology that has come out of that area, it probably wouldn't surprise you then to learn that some of the key players were actually involved in the early days research into LSD and breathwork. And why have they been able to change the world with their tech? Well, it might just be because they have entered a different state of consciousness. They've seen things from a different perspective. They've seen possibilities that they never knew about.
Fascinating. So let's talk cold water. I'm quite excited about this one.
Okay. So, yeah, cold water for me, the more I was looking, as I said, I've now trained with lots of different breathwork schools, and there is just such a great correlation between breathwork and cold water. And I'd actually only done a couple of Wim Hof days myself, where I'd got in and it was 2 minutes in ice, there was full of ice. And I was thinking, well, I already know, whilst I loved the ice, I loved doing that, and it was the bravado of doing it in a group. I already know from my breathwork experience that some of his stuff is controversial, but I'm curious about this because it clearly makes a difference. So I then was thinking, well, I want to find out what other schools are offering. How do they teach it? What do they do? And so I trained with a couple of those schools. And as a result of that, I have to do some pretty hardcore, full-on protocols. Or I can't even go into how difficult they are. I'm not ready to complete yet. I've done all of the theory and some of the practical, but there's a few steps that I'm just not ready. I've got to build myself up to it. But what I found amazing is that how quickly it can wake you up. The dopamine, the endorphins that you get, right? Those first few, when my husband and I committed to doing it daily, I would say for 4 or 5 hours, we were both high as kites, but in a really great way. Like we felt amazing. We were texting each other all day because he was at work saying, "Are you still feeling good?" "Yeah, I am." And then with the breathing added onto it, it just makes such a difference. And the research now is really beginning in the cold water space. Unfortunately, until very recently, it had largely been anecdotal, the benefits. But and the reason being with both breath and cold water is that who normally funds research? It's normally the big pharmaceuticals. Now, pharmaceuticals are not interested in showing you can feel better without medication. They're not interested in that. But, the inflammation that it can help with, well, you know this, David, from your use of cold water.
Yeah, as you say, the inflammation side for me has been a crazy journey. And yeah, with obviously after having a car accident, couldn't feel my hand, sensations in my fingers, and yeah, it overrided that. And then I had a period where I couldn't sleep for about 6 weeks, and yeah, that helped. Other things I've noticed as well, just if you have a bad night's sleep and you feel a bit groggy, or maybe you've got a headache for whatever reason, I've noticed instantly once I've gone in there and tried to talk myself to going in there, it's had a massive impact in that respect as well. So yeah, no wonder the pharmaceutical companies would run a mile.
We will see more research into the breath and cold water coming now. Some of it driven by universities rather than pharmaceuticals, but it's going to be slower. It's going to be slower to get that research because, pharmaceuticals are profit, aren't they? But if you speak to anyone who's regularly doing cold water or regularly doing informed breath work where they really know what they're doing, you'll just from talking to them, you'll know their energy is really different. One of the things actually I did want to mention, which from a biomechanical perspective of breathing, because we were talking about functional breathing earlier, is that most of us, because we are breathing predominantly from our upper chest, right, rather than all of our lungs or even the diaphragm and belly moving, our diaphragm, when we are dysfunctionally breathing, is moving about 0.5 centimetre to 1 centimetre at most, right? But what's supposed to happen when we belly breathe and get the diaphragm moving is that it actually squashes down by 10 to 15 centimetres with every breath we take. And in doing that, it's squeezing out all the toxins from all of our organs, which we then release with the carbon dioxide coming out of our mouth. If we don't breathe fully and optimally and functionally, those toxins aren't being released elsewhere. They don't end up going into our sweat. They don't end up coming out in our urine or whatever else. So they're stuck there. We're literally keeping those toxins inside of us. And what we're supposed to do when we breathe optimally is release over 70% of our toxins through the diaphragm movement and breathing it out, which again, just blows me away. We're seeing a massive crisis, particularly in teenagers, particularly young people, in mental health anxiety, suicide attempts, suicide ideation. And what if they knew this stuff? What if they knew it?
Yeah, it's something that should be taught in schools, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't feel that I'm going to be the person to do that. But I hope very much that someone that I train will take that on as let's go do this, let's make it happen.
Yeah, there will be people out there, won't there, that have that niche where they're helping young people. So, case of watching this space. So, certainly, when you go back to the cold water, I've been really interested in Susanna Soberg's work, where she's done an awful lot of research in this area. And she also looks at heat as well and the differences.
Heat protocol.
I would definitely check out her work to anybody who's listening. It's fascinating. She talks about winter swimming in general. She's from Denmark, and obviously in Scandinavia, that's a big part of the culture, is the whole the sauna by the sea sort of thing.
Of course. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, really.
Yeah, I'm interested again. We go back to cold water for a moment.
Yeah, of course.
I'm guessing you've had a few occasions where you've stood there and thought, absolutely no way I can get in here.
One day, David, where I got my leg in, but I didn't get in quick enough. I was like, getting out. I just don't know why, but I can't do it today. And my husband was like, because I made him do it in the first place. And it's actually become, I'm going to say this, it's been so good for our marriage. Not that our marriage was in a bad place, but the fact that every morning we're putting on our swimming costumes. We got our woolly hats on. We look ridiculous. The puppy and the dog are running around. I mean, and we do this. I always go first, then he goes. And we are literally laughing within like 10 minutes, really hard, and having a good old chat before anything else happens in the day. Like, it's so good for us. And just the fact that we're both seeing each other really happy as well, early in the morning, it just sets things up beautifully.
It does. You feel a bit giddy, don't you, in some respects?
Yeah, you do. Can't remember your question now. Cold water. Oh yeah. So this one time I got my leg in. I wasn't mentally ready. Got my one leg in. I was just like, I'm just not there today. I had to get out. And I was so cross with myself because Jeff was high as a kite all day. And I was like, oh, I didn't do it. That's so annoying. So I haven't let myself down since then.
I know when I first started, literally, if I had the camera on, it would have been hilarious. I would literally dip my toes into the bath and I'd be in about 3 seconds and straight out. So did you manage, when you did the Wim Hof days and you said, you were an ice, did you manage to actually get in there?
Yeah.
Because obviously at that point you wouldn't have done any training. You would literally
No. But we'd done quite a lot of breath stuff. And I think once you've seen some other people do it, you're going to do it.
Right.
Like there is definitely I'm quite competitive anyway, but I wasn't going to let the side down. And actually, I didn't fall in love with it at that point. I got curious about it at that point.
Yeah.
And it was actually like now doing it at home. And I think this is the thing, like the ice isn't necessary. The ice is almost showmanship as far as I'm concerned. When you look at all the evidence around it, you can get exactly the same benefits with water that's 15 degrees as you can sitting with the ice. I mean, it looks great on Instagram, but it's not necessary. So the very first one I ever did was 2 minutes in full ice, which was cold.
Very cool.
But when we decided, because my husband, he just wasn't sure to start with, so we started just with whatever temperature had come out of the tap, which I think it was probably about 13 degrees when we started doing it daily. And at first, like we said, we would do it together. So we'd do small increments each time. So we literally started with a minute. And then we added on 15 seconds, and now we're both, I don't know, about 7-8 minutes, something like that.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think they turn around and say, is it 11 minutes per week? That's what they say, don't they? Is actually helpful enough. So really, you don't actually have to do 7 minutes per day, do you? Just a couple of minutes a day is fine.
But what I find, I can't put my hands in. Like for me, that just doesn't work. It's too painful on my my wrists. And I also find that there's a really big difference between getting myself just above my rude booby area, to if I get my shoulders fully immersed.
Right.
Because,
okay.
and actually that's where we can get the most, it's cold, it's so cold, but that's where we can actually get the most benefit if we get our shoulders fully under the water.
Okay.
Because what we're doing is we're activating I've forgotten what it is now, the phrenic nerve and the
vagus
nerve and the phrenic nerve are both activated when we do that.
Yeah.
And so that's where the biggest, but it's really cold on your neck.
And if you wave your hands around as well and make the water swirl around.
Oh, that's just mean. You're mean because you're breaking that thermal layer that your body creates. So
yeah, that makes it really interesting.
Once I'm in, I'm not moving.
Yeah, I remember reading when I was first into it about the different layers you can add to add additional stress, and yeah, that's the real top layer for me.
Yeah, the moving.
Yeah, no doubt about it. As you say, it's the hands and for me, it's the feet as well. I'm starting to get used to that now.
Yeah.
They're the real.
It's going to be interesting for me because I don't have Raynaud's, but I get very cold hands, and it'll be interesting to see this winter what happens, because I've been improving my circulation. So will I feel as cold? Will I not? I don't know. It's going to be an interesting test.
I know for myself, when I think back, I've never really been a winter person. I've always got wrapped up and what have you. But yeah, I have noticed so far. Well, I know we're not deep into winter, but it hasn't really bothered me. I've even gone outside with a t-shirt on at times.
Well, you're supposed to be proper hardy up in the northeast anyway, Dave,
yeah,
you?
True. Yeah, go down the big market and you notice that.
In a vest.
Exactly. So, yeah, what does the future hold then in terms of your business with regards to, the breathwork and the cold water?
So growing the breathwork coach certification, getting more people through that. We're on halfway through our first cohort now, opening again in January for a January cohort, and developing a level 2 so that people are not just coaches or practitioners themselves, but then actually can go out and teach. And also we will be having a cold water ice immersion arm at some point. But the main thing for me is that I've deliberately created something that is there's different levels of knowledge with breath, but also as a coaching tool, because, I come from a background of NLP and hypnosis and life coaching and business strategizing. And what I've seen is that there's this huge possibility of really taking this breath knowledge and deepening some transformative coaching work with it, but also for people who are really stressed or really overwhelmed. Well, how can we layer this into the coaching that we're already giving them to give them practical tools to take it away? So my mission really is just to get the word out and to do it in a calm, peaceful, centered, grounded way. And that's really important for me because I am an ambitious, driven woman. I have a busy family life and I cannot go at the pace that I used to go at. I've got no interest in going at that pace anymore. At the same time, I know that this work is probably the most important thing I've ever done. And so this is slow and steady wins the race for me now. And I think in that, I guess my point of that is we are living in this fast-paced environment that is not good for our bodies, and we aren't coping. That's why we're seeing a mental health crisis right across the board. There is not one person listening to this who either has suffered depression, anxiety, immense amount of stress, burnout, panic disorder, or depression, or knows someone close to them who has. There is not one person listening. This is huge. And we can't continue believing that it's more all the time. Sometimes we have to take things away. And I feel as though, David, that certainly since you and I last spoke, that I have reached a point where, I've got the 7 figures in the business and I'd met amazing people and was invited to meet Richard Branson and things like that. But actually none of it matters, because if you haven't got your health and you haven't got your mental health, you've got nothing, right? And our family life has been really impacted by the pressures on young people. And it's time to get the word out that we don't have to live in this high pressured culture anymore. Right? It's up to us to change. We can only change by learning how to do this stuff ourselves.
Yeah, it's true. Less is more, isn't it? That saying. And as you say, your health. Yeah, it's vital. It's you can't. Well, when it comes down to a performing capacity, you can't perform. Your relationships suffer. You just everything goes.
But I think for listeners, a lot of your listeners who are in that sports area, having a concept of what they're doing with their breath would be vitally important.
Most definitely, because performance anxiety is going to be the key thing there for the performer in that respect.
But not just that, but the awareness of like, how can you? So for athletes, for example, one of the things we look at is how can they increase their ability to hold their breath in a particular way so that they are accustomed to having more CO2 in their body before they release. And what that can do is literally improve your athletic performance by incredible amounts. And that all comes down to knowing when to hold your nose, when not to. And once those breathing habits become ingrained, they become second nature, your athletic ability you'll flourish. Like, it's literally about how you get the edge. Particularly for pro athletes where they're already top of the game, how can you improve your performance when you're doing everything exercise wise and nutrition wise? Well, breath can be the answer, without a doubt.
That's an interesting one, that, because I've noticed some of the real top footballers, Erling Haaland, there's been pictures of him on Instagram where when he's been going to sleep, I think he's had some tape around his nose. So it's
actually not taping your nose, it's usually taping your mouth.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can either tape it with like micropore tape, or you can actually get something called myo tape, MYO tape, that has a hole in it, so you could still speak, but it would be a lot of effort for your mouth if you but there's different reasons why you'd go for one or the other. And you don't have to even start doing it in your sleep. You can just start by wearing that tape for 20 minutes in the day. And you're just beginning to teach your breathing muscles to breathe through your nose, because your mouth is no longer available. We're not actually supposed to breathe through our mouth 100% of the time. And when you learn to breathe through your nose, you're actually taking in much more nitric oxide. And that's almost like magic dust for your body. It improves absolutely everything. And you are also not taking in as much waste product in, I always think when you go on like the London Underground and you blow your nose afterwards and it's black. Well, if you're breathing through your mouth, all that blackness just ends up in your lungs. So breathing is fascinating.
I'll have to do some reading on that one, no doubt about it.
For sure.
So in terms of what we've spoken about, it's been absolutely fascinating, and big thank you for your time there. What would the 3 key takeaways be for the listeners from our conversation?
You can ask me this, and I wrote them down earlier. So I think number 1 is, with stress, start trusting your gut and your intuition. And in breathwork, we talk about it as felt sense. Our body is telling us, like literally millions, if not billions, if not trillions of cells in our body are telling us that something is a wrong idea or a bad idea, or we shouldn't do it. So listen to it, first of all, because often that's when we get most stressed, when we're not listening to our signals. The second thing is that learning to control your stress in the moment, right? So learning these very simple exercises to switch your breathing from activated stress breathing to belly breathing, longer breaths on the exhale, is going to be a game changer for you, not just in those emergencies, quick fix situations, but long term too. And then the third thing is shut your mouth. Just shut your mouth for the majority of time you're breathing. We weren't designed to breathe through our mouths. That's just a kind of backup option. And so many good things happen when we breathe through our nose that don't happen when we breathe through our mouth, that you can change your health within about 3 weeks of breathing through your nose.
Fabulous. That's great advice, that is, yeah. Whereabouts can the listeners find you should they want to reach out?
So I'm all over the place, but my main website is influentialbreathwork.com. You can come and find out a bit about what we're doing. And again, Influential Breathwork on Instagram.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, again, a big thanks for your time and for your insights there, Anna.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was an enjoyable episode to record. I didn't think I could have so much fun talking about the breath. And when we think about mental toughness is all about dealing with pressure, dealing with stress, dealing with challenges. So being in control of your breath, well, it's going to help you be more in control of yourself during these difficulties. So there's an argument to say we're talking about emotional control here. But then, actually, if you look at all of the 8 factors of mental toughness, if you're in control of yourself, in control of your breath, it's going to go and impact the way that you set goals. You're unlikely to be distracted so much. You're not going to be rushing around like a crazy man or woman. You're going to be a lot more strategic in the way that you do set your goals. Then if we think about confidence, well, you're going to feel better in yourself. You're going to have more clarity of thought when it comes down to completing tasks. And then when it comes down to communicating with other people, so interpersonal confidence in this respect, you may feel more balanced. Throw in the challenge aspect and taking risks. It could well be that you're able to take a step back and assess the risk before actually going ahead, so you make better decisions downfield. You've also got learning orientation, which again is a part of the challenge measure. Now, if we're in control of the breath, we're more likely to take a step back, to think about what we've been up to, the good things that we've actually done, what we've done well, what we can improve, and how we can get better. So it's fair to say breathing is certainly going to have an impact on performance. It's going to help us make the most of our talents and our skills. And when it comes down to health, naturally, it has got many health benefits. So it's certainly worthwhile just paying attention to your breath. This could be your challenge over the festive period, to see if you can notice your breath more so on a daily basis. And if you've got time, maybe you might want to check out Anna's work. She's very highly qualified, as well as just doing some reading about breath work. And on the cold water side, I'll be continuing my daily tradition of jumping in an ice bath and in cold water. The temperature's certainly dropped recently, which makes it good fun. I'll likely be out doing some open water swimming as well, so ice swimming actually, which is below 5 degrees. That is one big test, to say the least. In all seriousness though, when it comes down to deliberate cold immersion, I really would check out the work of Dr. Susanna Soberg. She's done an awful lot of research into this type of therapy, and the benefits, both physically and mentally, are amazing. I'm certainly living proof that cold water can make a huge difference to your life when it comes down to managing pain, and you can have quite a lot of fun with it along the way. I hope you go on to enjoy the festivities over the next couple of weeks. Until next time. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.